Lesson 1.2. In this lesson, we are going to look at a review of the grammar for the typical verb tenses. In this case, we're looking at the present simple and continuous, past simple and continuous. And then we'll look at some vocabulary related to personal relationships, and the type of functions of language we are going to deal with are talking about people in your life for which we will need these vocabulary. The first activity is a speaking activity that we'll try to do in class when you come, but there is a second part. It says read the BBC blog. So the BBC blog is here, okay? And this is something that you have to do at home. Read it so that you have an idea of what to discuss about when we get back in class and we gather together. Then there is the grammar. There is the first activity for the review of the verb tenses. In here you have to match the underlined verbs here with the tenses here. Okay, so for instance, discovered, that's the past simple, right? And you have to do the others. Next, you will have to complete the rules with the tenses that we used here from A, B, C, and D. You put them in the gaps here, and here you've got rules for you to remember and review what these four tenses are used for mostly. I mean, they have other uses, but those are the most important uses of those verb tenses. Then there is a rule here about state verbs, and it says underline 3 examples in the blog opposite, so you have to find them. And the state verbs are verbs that do not take the continuous form because they are verbs of feeling, verbs of sensing, etc. This is something that you will also look at on page 128 in the language bank. When you got there, if you go to the section for 1.2, you will see there is a review of tenses here. You've got the present simple, an example of a positive, a negative, and a question. In the question, we see that we need an auxiliary. In the case of the third person singular, you just need to remember that we use the auxiliary form for the third person singular. So instead of do, it's das. And then the s from the main verb goes here. Okay, so you don't need to repeat it here. It says you use it to talk about something that is always true, about habits, about routines, etc. and state verbs. We will see that later. The present continuous, again, an example of a positive, a negative, and a question. Remember that you use it with the verb to be, so you can use contractions here. This is we are staying, but it's contracted into the form we're staying here. Or in this case, we are not is contracted into aren't staying here, okay? But the question form, obviously, since we move the verb to be to the front position, to the initial position of the sentence, there is no way you can contract it, okay? Just need to remember that. Then use it for something that is happening when you're talking, or something that is happening right now. The past simple, you've got an example of a positive, a negative, and a question. Remember that most verbs are regular and you use ed forms. There are some rules for pronunciation that you need to remember. Remember that the auxiliary for the negative or for the question is did. Okay, there is no difference with the third person singular in this case. And you use it for actions that are finished or situations in the past. And the past continues. Here you've got an example of a positive sentence, a negative sentence, and a question. Again, remember that we use the verb to be, but in this case, you use the simple past of the verb to be together with an ing form of the main verb. Okay? And in the question form, you move it again to the front position, as in the case of the present continuous. So you're only using the simple past of the verb to be. Remember, that you have the forms were and was for the first person. So was for the first person and were for the rest. Okay? You use it for talking about situations that were in progress in the past. Okay? And they were not finished. And now, it's important to remember that there are two types of verbs when you look at them from the perspective of meaning. State verbs and dynamic verbs, or action verbs. These are dynamic or action verbs, or state verbs or verbs of feeling mostly, okay? The most common verbs of feeling: love, hate, like. So you need to remember, or thinking verbs, they don't take progressive forms, and that means that you cannot put them in the past continuous or in the present continuous. But they very intelligently tell you here in the textbook that there are exceptions, and that's true. People make exceptions with these. For instance, I'm seeing Phil tonight, or we are having a party, or even this one. I like this one because here, if you use a continuous form, like the present continuous, it's not like I think, like this is my opinion. It's different. It's I'm considering this. I'm undecided. So the meaning is slightly changed when you use that tense, okay, with a state verb. So when you finish looking at this, go to the page on the right and try to do these two activities. The first one says underline the correct alternative, so you have to choose between the two options in italics. So here, I'm speaking or speak. Normally that would be I speak several languages because I do it all the time. It's not something that I'm doing now. And then in the second exercise in this grammar item, you have to put the verbs in brackets. So in this example, win, in the correct tense of the four that we've seen. Sit down and watch the game. We are winning because this is happening at this time, 2-1. Ronaldo scored 2 minutes ago. This is finished, but this is in progress. We are winning and the match has not finished. Okay, and you have to do the same for the rest. Put them in the right tense. Then you'll have to get back to page 11, and there in exercise 3A you have more practice of the tenses. So you have to again to read a personal profile. This is the text, the personal profile of someone, and put the words in brackets. So those are verbs in the correct tense. So basically the same kind of activity you just did. This one is something that we may have to do in class, and then we move to the next page, page 12. Here you've got a listening activity. It says read the description of a BBC documentary and answer these questions. So you listen to that first you read this, try to answer these 3 questions. You will have a fill in the gap activity in the platform, and then you move to the listening part. So you just play on this button or this button. It says take a piece of paper, listen to parts 1 and 2 and follow the test instructions. So you have to do that. Then you will have to listen to the explanation in part 3 by clicking on the button here, and then turn to page 158 of your textbook and check that you've done the activity correctly. Don't go there before you do these 2 parts, because then you will ruin the activity. Okay? Because you have to you have to draw something. Okay? And there you have to check if you did it all right or not. These are questions just for you to answer on your own. Next, you have another part. It says listen to people discussing their pictures of the bicycle. So people who did the same activity you just did are discussing how it went. Okay? And you have to simply identify who says these 6 sentences. If it's a man or a woman, just that, man or woman. And then, again, as in the discussion activities, this is something that it's more oriented towards a classroom, so you don't need to do that at home. Then you have got the vocabulary activity. Remember, relationships is the topic. So you've got here, you can't work in pairs at home, obviously, but it says, look at the words in the box. This is the box here, and try to answer the questions. Okay, you've got an example here. Which pair work together, boss and employees? So you try to put these as the answers to these 8 questions. Okay. Right, then we're going to skip to, you've got this, but this is something, again, we'll do in class, and you've got something on the next page about collocations. Collocations are combinations of words that typically go together. Okay, and you've got this example, to go on a diet. Okay, this is the typical verb that you use when you talk about these. Okay, it says, look at the quiz. It says, first turn to page 158 and read the text to check your answers. Well, first you're supposed to do this on your own, I assume, because you're at home, and then you're going to try to write the expressions here using the expressions, the verb, and the rest of the collocation. Okay, you have self-correction in the platform, so it shouldn't be difficult. Once you finish all those 4 sets of collocations with their meanings for you to understand, you've got some extra vocabulary work on page 148. Okay, so on page 148, you've got here an example. It says, add the words and expressions in italic to the correct places in each gap. Okay, so you've got gaps here to complete with other words, and you've got these as examples to follow. Okay.